Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining Ask Miss Jai Live. I am super excited to be here again with you for the second part of the U.S. Conference on HIV/AIDS and sharing a little bit back around what I learned from my time there throughout the rest of Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. So thank you so much for joining. If you are joining on Instagram, there are portions of this that you're not going to have the visual for during this go live. However, it will be part of the video that is ultimately uploaded. So thank you for taking the time to be here. Thank you for taking the time to learn about this. I am excited. I think that the biggest piece of what will be learned from the pieces that I'm going to be talking about today are some of the resources that are available to us and some of the things that folks might be able to utilize in order to get support for trans and non-binary people in their communities, or for my trans and non-binary family, for us to be able to support one another. So one of the first things that I would like to talk about is for one of the trainings that talked about the social determinants of hope and health, and really what it is that's keeping the doors open in our organizations. And really, it's the community's investment in itself. We aren't going to end HIV or other STIs. We're not going to end transphobia or discrimination without investing in our communities and investing in those times, investing in our communities holistically. So if you are joining live, please go ahead and put a hashtag live in the chat. If you are joining in the replay, go ahead and put a hashtag replay and let me know what part of this is the most helpful for you. Again, my name is Miss Jai. I use she, her, and he, him pronouns. I come to you with a background in sexual health education, as well as HIV prevention and HIV care. And for the last almost 12 years, I've been doing work around supporting trans and non-binary people in sexual health education, as well as doing work to support organizations and being more affirming to trans and non-binary people. And so now I focus the majority of my work around helping healthcare organizations and public health organizations become more supportive for trans and non-binary patients and clients, and create services and programs that are affirming to the identities of trans and non-binary people, therefore keeping them engaged in services. So part of that is what I was just mentioning, which is this investing in our communities and investing in these communities holistically. We also got to work more collaboratively beyond the perceived scarcity of funding that is available to us. I think there's oftentimes a fear of like, if we don't get the pot, then someone else will get it, or if we don't get it, then no one will provide services in our community, and that's just not the case. There is funding available. There is also funding available outside of just HIV. Programmatic dollars or HIV grant dollars that can help support the health and wellness of trans and non-binary people. And so instead of working against one another in the community of like, my organization needs to get it versus your organization needs to get it, we can work collaboratively to actually bring programs to our communities that meet the needs of our community holistically, as opposed to just meeting the needs of like subpopulations within our communities. We need to also recognize how infrastructure can sometimes get in the way of developing health services for our programs. So if you think about the legislation that has like over criminalized the use of, or like being able to carry condoms on your body, or like over criminalizing sex work, or over criminalizing Black communities, or over criminalizing trans communities, or STI states, those also all lead to challenges with getting services and health out into our community. So if we're criminalizing HIV in our states, then we are also going to potentially have difficulty getting people tested. We're going to have difficulty with getting people in for treatment. We're going to have difficulty with getting people maintained on that treatment. If we criminalize the number of condoms that someone can carry, then the folks who are most frequently targeted, which are in our country, are Black and brown folks who are perceived as trans. Like these are people who are more frequently stopped. These are people who are more frequently criminalized or harassed by police. Then if we say, okay, well, if you're carrying condoms on you, you're going to experience additional fines, or if you're carrying syringes on you, you're going to experience additional fines. Then it becomes harder for us to do the work of distributing condoms into our community, encouraging folks to engage in sex that reduces risk for HIV, encouraging folks to use a new syringe when they're using a substance or when they're injecting hormones. And so, like, that becomes a much more difficult push for us because of the infrastructure that's present in our states or in our country. And then if we think about it, also uh, there are ways that we can then, on the flip side, work within that structure, within legislation, in order to support our communities and the health of our communities, and recognizing that health goes beyond just the physical health. So things like housing support. How can we work with our local legislation around zoning laws, around tax breaks for new home buyers, around affordable housing? How can we work with our legislature or our local elected officials around getting money and funding into services that aren't just for a program or a project, but are also for the building of infrastructure and the building of and general funds in order to support an organization to start and to thrive. And so that kind of actually leads me into this next piece, which I'm going to try and share. And again, if you're on Instagram, you're not going to be able to see this, but I'm hoping that for the folks who are able to see it, that it will be helpful to have this piece. Okay, so the first resource that I want to share is the Trans Justice Funding Project. What came up pretty consistently amongst the program, or amongst the workshops that I attended, was this theme of wanting trainings that are developed for us and by us. There's it ensures that the information that is getting shared out there is accurate. It also ensures that the ways that we're talking about our communities reflect the ways that our communities actually are. There was also a big push that funding, like I said, support infrastructure and the general maintenance of a program, not just projects, because what we are seeing are some challenges, are challenges with funding to support trans people in our communities in general, where we have organizations come in and apply for funding for a project for trans and non-binary people, and scooping up that funding from the CDC or from SAMHSA, and then trying to build out and create a program to support trans and non-binary people when they've never had a history of supporting or providing services effectively for our community. And so, because of that, we have more and more organizations and funding streams that are popping up now that support trans led specific organizations. And there's really this push to move funding for trans health projects um, to organizations that are trans led and that have a history of supporting trans and non-binary people. And it's because we know then that they are effectively in our communities already, as opposed to having to create this from scratch or making a lot of assumptions around what it means to provide services to trans and non-binary people. So one of those programs is the Trans Justice Funding Project. The Trans Justice Funding Project is a trans-led funding program that helps to provide funds to small trans-led grassroots organizations across the United States. And so organizations don't have to be a 501c3. The application for funding is very simple. They are looking for not only projects, but they also can support in infrastructure. They can support in the um, maintenance of the program itself, or the maintenance of the organization itself. The funding is available in the form of micro grants up to $10,000 annually. That is available to these organizations, and they're only available to organizations that have a program budget of 250,000 or less, which for a lot of our grassroots trans organizations, we don't function with a budget of greater than $250,000. And so this is a way that we can help to support the work that we are doing, and be able to make decisions around the work that we are doing, and get that funding back into our community. The other thing is that there isn't a lot of reporting on the back end of it. There's not a lot of like reporting requirements. If something needs to change and we need to redirect the project or we need to redirect where that funding is going, then there's trust that is put into the hands of the organization, that we are going to get that funding where it needs to go, and we are going to get those services to where they need to go for our trans and non-binary folks that we serve. And then the other big push that happened a lot throughout the USCHA, and which you've seen if you've been on my page at all, if you've been on Ask Miss Jai, is that the 2022 US Trans Survey is now live. And we are really trying to get as many trans and non-binary folks to sign up and complete the survey, because this is the largest source of health information that we have for our trans and non-binary population, because the US Trans Survey, or excuse me, trans people are not, there's no data that's collected through the census for trans people. If it's collected in any of the like behavior BRFIS, like behavioral risk assessment surveys per state, then it's like infrequently collected. It's an add-on module. There are some states that have never collected it since it was introduced in 2016. So it's inconsistent as to whether or not we know what's happening in our states for trans and non-binary people, and whether or not we know what the health of our trans and non-binary folks look like. So the US Trans Survey is the largest of its kind that will be collecting this information, and it's also benchmarked against other surveys around health and wellness, so that we are able to make more accurate comparisons between trans and cisgender populations as to what our experiences are as a community. So it is only open for 4 weeks. It opened on the 19th of October. So if you haven't taken it yet, please go to ustranssurvey.org and take the survey. It is extensive. I took it and it took about 70 minutes or so, like an hour and 10 minutes in order to complete it. It is a large, hefty undertaking. So I encourage folks to grab a cup of coffee and sit down in the morning and work on it. You can work on it through your phone. If you have a computer, you can work on it. If you go to the library for a computer, you can work on it. You can work on it through your work computer. So it is available to you electronically. And then if you are a health provider, or you're working within an organization that provides services to trans and non-binary people, I highly encourage that you reach out to the National Center for Trans Equality so that you can get information on how to get people, your patients and your clients, to this survey and get this information filled out, because this survey has been used for um, it's been used to make decisions around funding. It's been used to make decisions around the development of programs, to identify what the health needs of our communities are and where we need to focus effort in order to make sure that we are reducing disparities between cis and trans people around things like suicidality and mental health needs and housing services and discrimination in education and discrimination in public accommodations. And really, it's main one of the main surveys that shows us uh, how many barriers exist to healthcare for trans and non-binary people. So it's a really important survey in our community, and I highly encourage folks to either take it if you identify as trans or non-binary, or to funnel folks to it. And if you are trans or non-binary, the other thing is that, like, we know each other, we know our friends, we know our trans fam, we know our trans siblings. So, like, also send it to the people within your networks, because this is how we get folks involved with it. The 2015 US Trans Survey had almost 30,000 respondents. It is anticipated that this US Trans Survey will have over 60,000 respondents. So please, please, please encourage folks to get to this survey. And then the final piece that I want to share is some of the data that was shared with me, or shared in work groups around some of the specific communities within the trans community, because this is the other piece. This is why the US Trans Survey is so important, is because it also shows us that trans people are not a monolith. The experiences of trans people across identity, so the experiences of trans women versus the experiences of trans men versus the experience of non-binary people are all going to be different. But we also see that there are differences amongst the trans community based on our racial and ethnic backgrounds as well. So the experiences of white trans people and non-binary people are going to be different than the experiences of Black trans people, and the experiences of Latino trans people, and the experiences of Indigenous trans people. So like the experiences are all going to be different. And what we see pretty consistently is that if we don't have enough information about the community, or the community has been erased in services in the past, then there's disproportionate experiences of like health challenges that come up. So transmasculine people report greater experiences of mistreatment in healthcare organizations, avoidance of healthcare in the past 12 months, experiencing a medical emergency due to avoidance. There's greater experiences of mental health challenges, greater experiences of just trying to access services and being ignored or being mistreated. So and then we see that those are more pronounced for our Black and brown trans siblings compared to us as white trans folks and non-binary folks. So this is one of the reasons why this survey is so important, is because it is also one of the most extensive to look at the different communities within our trans and non-binary community and the different health experiences of those communities. Because traditionally, the way that we've collected data, the way that we have collected health data, especially, has kind of, if trans people were present, it's pushed trans people into one category and one box, which has then made it very difficult for us to be able to make comparisons amongst our community. And that's been predominantly because we've been told that the sample sizes of trans people within our research are too small. So we're not able to make comparisons or talk about generalizations for trans and non-binary people within our research because the sample sizes are so small. But part of the reason why the sample sizes are so small is because we're not accurately asking about trans identity, and we're not ensuring that trans people are present in our research. And so, since this is specifically about trans people, since it is going to be comparing, it's benchmarked against other health surveys that are taking place in the United States around these like large pieces like mental health and suicidality and gun violence and all these other pieces, then it helps us to make more accurate comparisons and get a better understanding of what the actual experiences of our community are. So some of the things that were shared from the conference that I think are important for us to point out. There were two research studies that were shared. One is from USCHA. And it stated that 68% of transmasculine people experienced healthcare mistreatment in their lifetime. 43% avoided healthcare in the past 12 months, and 5% of those experienced a medical emergency due to the avoidance. And then also that 25% of transmasculine people have sex, which makes them eligible for PrEP. So I'm going to say that again. A quarter of transmasculine people engage in some form of sexual activity that, per CDC guidelines, makes them eligible for PrEP. So transmasculine people are eligible for PrEP based on the sex that they are having, or a quarter of them are. However, only 33.9%, so a third of those who would be eligible, received any sort of information about PrEP, and only 10.9% of those received a prescription. So we're seeing this disparity in receiving services. We're seeing this disparity in being able to have access to all of the prevention tools that are available to us, or that transmasculine people are experiencing a disparity in accessing services that are available to them that would give them the tools to reduce the likelihood of seroconversion or a new HIV infection, a new HIV diagnosis. And then the image that is on the screen right now, which again, folks on Instagram can't see, is a little bit blurry, but it also shows that we know that the rates of suicidality are high in our community. 46% of trans men attempt suicide in their lifetime. We know that 47% of trans men experience symptoms of anxiety, 48% experience symptoms of depression, and we know that 30% of trans individuals report postponing or avoiding medical treatment due to discrimination and disrespect. So we're seeing like these ranges, right? So 30% is in one research study, 68% or 43% is in another study of these folks who are avoiding medical treatment or delaying medical treatment. And so it's another reason why this survey is so important, is because these sample sizes are going to be different. These research studies are also looking at geographically specific areas. And so if we are funneling folks, we're getting folks to fill out the US Trans survey, that is going to give us a more holistic picture of what's happening in our communities across the United States. But then they also go in and they look at each individual state and they say, this is what's happening in your state based off the respondents from your state. So even if our state elects to not collect health data around trans people, even if we are living in a state that makes it more difficult or where there is opposition to understanding the health needs of trans people, the US Trans Survey is still going to do everything it can to provide us with that data and that information so that we as public health professionals, we as healthcare providers can make informed decisions around the development of programs, around the ways that we are reaching out to our communities and the way that we are providing services to our trans and non-binary patients and clients. So I just want to say thank you again to and express a really large gratitude to the Denver Prevention Training Center for sending me out to be able to experience the U.S. Conference on HIV and AIDS and learn this information. And I really hope that you'll take the opportunity to look into some of these resources that already exist in order to help beef up our services in our individual communities, but also so that we are getting information to our trans and non-binary patients and clients as is helpful. And I just want to take a look really quick because I want to make sure I didn't miss anything that could be that I wanted to talk about for today. Oh, there is one other resource that I would like to share, and that is the Transgender Strategy Center. So their website is www.transgenderstrategy.org, and they are an organization that helps to provide capacity building, support, and training for trans and non-binary leaders. So if you are watching this and you are saying to yourself, I want to be a leader in my community, I want to be able to make an impact, I want to make a difference, and you are trans or non-binary, then you can go to www.transgenderstrategy.org and sign up for some of their classes, sign up for their programming to help build your capacity as a trans leader, because the reality is that there are not enough of us in our community, there are not enough trans leaders in our community, and we want to support one another. And at some point also we're going to need to like pass off the hat to the next generation of trans leaders. This work isn't sustainable for our own wealth, our own health and wellness, and so it's important for us to be building leaders in our community that can continue on in this work and to support folks and collaborate with folks in their leadership as well. And then also just a reminder for folks who are in West Hollywood or Oakland, the National Trans Visibility March is October 31st through November 4th. I think the majority of the events are happening in West Hollywood, but there is one event that's happening in Oakland during that time frame. So if you are in that area, I encourage you to check out nationaltransvisibilitymarch.org so that you can see how you can get involved in that event and in the events that are upcoming for that. So again, thank you all so much for being here. I'm really grateful to have been able to share information back about the U.S. Conference on HIV and AIDS for the second half of the conference. And I look forward to continuing to share information out as Ask Ms. Jai Live. My final question for you all, and you can please put it in the comments or you can send me a direct message. But we have been doing Ask Ms. Jai Live now for a few months. And so I want to just do a temperature check with the folks who are watching this or the folks who catch it on the replay and find out if this is still helpful, if it would be more helpful to provide almost like a weekly conversation on a specific topic as opposed to doing a question and answer, or if it's helpful to really like drill it down into a specific piece of a topic. So would it be helpful to have a conversation for 15 minutes on what poppers are and how poppers work? Would it be helpful to have a conversation on how to create or a gender affirming lobby? Would it be helpful to have a conversation on how to improve communication with our trans and non-binary patients and just focus on the communication aspects? So please let me know in the comments what you would like to see, what do you think would be most helpful to you, and what makes you tune in, so that I can continue to bring you the good news. And then join us next Sunday on October 30th for a conversation with Dr. Eric Escarino, from Wombat Mental Health Services. Very excited to be bringing them in to have a conversation on the services that they provide, and also to get the perspective of someone who is part of our community, is part of the trans and non-binary community, and is also a licensed clinical social worker. So for my folks who are out there who are LCSWs, and are interested in learning more about how you can provide services in an effective way to trans and non-binary people, please tune in. Wombat Mental Health Services also provides support to deaf communities as well as Indigenous communities out of the LA area. So very excited to have this conversation. So please join us next Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for our next Ask Miss Jai Live. And until then, I hope you have a wonderful and amazing rest of your Sunday. And thank you, as always, for investing in the health and well being of trans and non binary people.